Good evening. I am Marcia Marins, member of the League of Women Voters of Chautauqua County, and we are pleased to present our Meet the Candidates Night. Organizing this virtual debate is a new and exciting opportunity for the League. Those who have attended our in-person debates will recognize a familiar format, which we can now extend to many more viewers than we could accommodate in a physical space. And we're very pleased that candidates have been eager to join us in this venture. Our role is to let the candidates talk directly to the people as possible. We let the candidates challenge each other on the facts. Journalists, pundits, and voters will have the opportunity to fact check afterwards. It's a debate. We, like a referee, enforce the rules and the time and simply stay out of our way. Our timekeeper is there. You can see where it says timekeeper at the bottom of the screen. And keep an eye on the time because I will. We want the voters to be informed. The debate gives them a means of forming a firsthand judgment of the candidates and also serves the candidates because it gives them an opportunity to present their views. We have not given the candidates these questions in advance except the first one. They will respond unscripted, so to speak, so you can see how well they can think on their feet. As with everything else right now, we are learning how to modify traditional in-person events to virtual ones. So please be patient with us. If any portion of this Meet the Candidates Night is redistributed out of context, then we will alert the media and file appropriate complaints with any applicable government authority. This recording will be on YouTube, local access channels 1301 and in Dunkirk and Fredonia, and our website. And it probably won't be loaded for at least 24 hours due to Zoom traffic in the cloud. The League of Women Voters is a trusted political organization that does not support any candidate or political party. League places an emphasis on getting out the vote, voter registration drives, Take Me to Vote programs in elementary schools, and efforts to streamline voter registration laws, for which we have made great progress this year. These are all a part of League activities. For this segment, we welcome candidates for New York State 23rd Congressional District, Tracy Mitrano and Andrew Kolsty. Unfortunately, Incumbent Tom Reed has not responded to our invitation. However, we can continue with two remaining candidates. Our candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to a question they received prior to this meeting and include a brief presentation discussing their qualifications. Audience questions have been solicited and collected from the public prior to the start of the event via email or phone. All questions will have been reviewed and sorted by a panel of League members based on relevancy to the office and encompass a wide array of topics as possible. Questions of a personal nature will not be permitted, and it is not feasible to take audience questions during this debate. After the opening statements, candidates will have the ability to question one another. If a question is addressed to a specific candidate, the other candidate will be welcome to add comments or replies of their own. Candidates will have 1 minute to respond to questions, but will also be able to rebut or challenge one another, limited to 30 seconds. There will be no counter rebuttals. The candidates will not interrupt each other. I have the authority to pause the proceedings to enforce the ground rules if necessary. There will be 1 minute for closing statements. Your opening statement should describe your qualifications for the office and respond to this question: What do you consider the most pressing issue facing New York State 23rd Congressional District, and what would you do to address and resolve this issue if selected? By draw, Mr. Kolsty will answer this question first.
All right. My name is Andrew Kolsty. I'm the Libertarian Party candidate for NY23. Political activist since 2015. I'm the chair of the Chautauqua County Libertarian Party, the secretary of the Libertarian Party of New York, recently elected. I'm a business owner. I have a digital marketing business that I started recently, and also a genealogy business. I'm involved in local history. I'm the secretary at the Fenton History Center in Jamestown and trustee of the Chautauqua County Genealogical Society. I got involved in politics a few years ago because I didn't like what I saw. There was continuous division and just back and forth, and nothing was getting done. They say they were. Government was growing and growing and growing, but the problems were getting worse and worse and worse. You know, when we look at the 2016 presidential election and we looked at the 2020, it's just a contest for who's worse, so we can you know, vote for the least of the worst. So when looking at the most pressing issue for New York 23, it kind of goes way beyond New York 23, because I think the most pressing issue is not any particular issue, but how we actually approach the discussion. The core issue has, you know, a lot of people are flocking to independent third parties. We're constantly, we're divided, left, right, polarization, you know, everyone is going to their tribes, and each side is calling each other, you know, evil. And it's getting to the part where we can't communicate with each other. So what we really need to do is we need to change the way we talk about these things. Take you know, the most hardcore Trump conservative and put them in the room with the most, you know, socialist Bernie Sanders supporter, and find some sort of common ground and work from there, and in order to move forward, because we're never gonna get past all of this unless we actually do that. So what I want to do is we want to get past the left right. We need to get to the root of the problems instead of, you know, being on the surface, and we just need to come up with new solutions, new out of the box solutions. So that's thank you.
All right, look for the stop at the bottom, folks. Thanks. Ms. Mitrano.
Thank you. And I want to thank all of the League of Women Voters for hosting the forum tonight. And I want to thank my Libertarian opponent, Mr. Kolsty, Andrew, for coming. You know, he and I may disagree or agree. It sounds like we're going to agree with a lot with what his introductory statement is. But I think we absolutely can agree that it is vital to have informed elections. And I'm delighted in joining him tonight and honoring those American values for our voting public. My goal tonight is for people to get to know me better, especially people in Chautauqua. And you know that I lived out here for 3 months last year in 2019, and I'm from Western New York originally. And hopefully that you'll get to know me better. I don't need to tell good people that campaign advertising leaves a lot to be desired. And the absent candidate, Tom Reed, has stooped to new lows with his mendacious and grotesque ads about me in particular. And so I will say in my opening statement, I believe he is running scared, because our polling shows that when people find out about me, the more likely they are to vote for me. And so his attempt to strangle a good forum by not appearing here tonight is actually a wonderful opportunity, because without Tom Reed to get in the way of discourse that Andrew just mentioned and I would like to pursue, without his getting in the way of truth and honesty, we can all have a better chance to get to know each other authentically. So again, thank you for inviting me tonight. The number one issue in this district has long been economic revitalization. The incumbent has had the office for 10 years and he has done nothing to do it, even while the economy was roaring for almost all of those years during the pandemic. The formula is very simple, although it is a challenge to address: affordable healthcare, good education, infrastructure, including the internet, proper resource management of our beautiful natural environment, and we will become a place where people want to invest. We have not had that dedication, commitment, or even vision for what's going to revive the 23rd District. I believe I do, and I'm looking forward to explaining my platform more. And in the same spirit of what Andrew mentioned, we have to genuinely work together. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, candidates. Well, again, we'll now open our meeting to question and answer format. Please remember that rebuttals are limited to 30 seconds and no counter rebuttals. The first question, should the country move closer to a single payer government managed healthcare system or further away? We'll begin with Mr. Kolsty.
The main problem with healthcare is, I think we focus too much on, obviously, it's clear that the costs have been rising for years and years and years. But it's with economics, it's with supply and demand. I don't think the question should be asking, how are we going to pay for it? The question we should be asking is, why are the costs too high? A lot of that has to do with collusion of insurance companies, governments, medical institutions, inflating the prices. What we need to do is open the charge master. We need to have these prices transparent. It'll open up competition out there, as well as medical choice. When you have these companies buried in FDA red tape, loopholes and things, medications don't get to market, and then people suffer, people die. So we need to focus on the underlying issue, which is the cost, as opposed to, how are we going to pay for it? Otherwise the price is just going to go up and up and up, and we're going to try to find how to pay for it when it's even more expensive.
Thank you. Mrs. Mitrano.
Yes, I think that we have all gotten ourselves far too mired in talking about specific plans, and we have lost sight of the goals of what healthcare should be in this country. Affordable, available, and efficient. We have the most inefficient healthcare system in the world. And some of the things that Andrew mentioned, I agree with. We need more transparency. We need to not be locked up by the large pharmaceutical and insurance industries, controlling the market in such a way and rapaciously taking profit out of it and forgetting that healthcare essentially is about people. I think that we need going together in Congress on a bipartisan, or however you want to call it, just working together. We can agree on some things that I know the people in this district agree on, no matter what registration they have for a party. They want to have a protection against pre-existing conditions. They want to bring down the cost of prescription drugs. They want to have basic drugs available, insulin, EpiPens, inhalers. Those are the kinds of things we can work on together.
Thank you. Our next question is, should the U.S. seek to rejoin the Paris Agreement? We'll begin with Mrs. Mitrano.
Yes, I do think that the challenges that we face about the environment and the rising temperature, climate change, however you want to describe it, and I speak to people all over this district. There's not a single farmer I've ever spoken to that doesn't acknowledge something has changed. We either have extremes of wetness or we have extremes of drought, and they sometimes can experiencing them all in the space of 18 months, deeply affecting the small margins that they already operate on. This is a collective effort. It's an international effort. And if the Paris Accords, and I believe they are the central place where we can negotiate these matters, the United States must participate in them. So I do agree we should rejoin Paris Accords when Biden and Harris are elected to office.
Thank you. Mr. Kolsty.
Certainly the environment is a huge issue that we need to address. But when we look at the Paris Agreement or any other kind of agreement in addressing this, we can't control what other nations do. We can't control what China's going to do. We can't control what they're going to do. We can only really control what we're going to do. And, if we need to set a good example with what you do, and one of the biggest polluters in the United States is the federal government, is the military-industrial complex. When we create war, when we promote war, instability, it creates destruction, it disrupts free trade and innovation, and it just leads to a lot more destruction, which then requires us to rebuild, which requires manufacturing and everything. So promoting peace, is key. They look at us as a threat, as a bully, as the policeman of the world, and we need to, in order for them to follow our example, as far as if we want to make the environment better, we need to lead on that, promote peace.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
May I have a 30-second rebuttal?
Yes, you may.
I do agree with Andrew that we have to have our own personal responsibility. I totally agree with that. But I do believe that and that we can't totally control other governments, but we must work together on some kind of agreements, because if we don't have those kinds of agreements, there's no place to start with what we must do collectively about this very urgent matter that affects all of us.
Thank you. Our next question. If Vice President Biden wins, would you support him in expanding the size of the Supreme Court if Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed? We'll begin with Ms. Mitrano.
That is not my preferred approach. I think that this is a method that you can boomerang. It works on both sides. You know, this reminds me of the question people ask me, do I want to limit terms? And no, I don't, because sometimes you get very good people who are in office. What we really need is campaign finance reform. And the real answer to packing the court is Congress needs to start to act. A lot of the issues that have been going to the Supreme Court are going that for the failure of Congress to do its job with these veteran politicians, both Republican and Democrat, who get in there, fight amongst themselves, and squander the opportunity and the need that people have for them to, in fact, act. So if the question right now, for example, is healthcare, Congress, get in there and act, do what the people need. I mentioned 3 things. I could mention 5 or 6 more. But in the time, my point is this: if we had a more active and appropriate Congress, we would not be talking about disrupting the whole constitutional historical setting of 9 justices. No, I'm not for packing the court. I'm for Congress acting.
Thank you. Mr. Kolsty.
I would oppose packing the court. You know, we've had 9 justices. You know, there's been attempts to do that in the past. Even the removal of a seat. So, you know, John Adams' successor couldn't, you know, add to that seat. It's just corruption. But I agree with Tracy. You know, anything that comes to the Supreme Court, you know, is because there was a law or there was a regulation, which, you know, it'd be Congress and the various agencies that come up with these regulations. You know, that's where it happens first. So, you know, it gets to the court as a last resort when there's, you know, dispute. So we need to actually prevent those disputes, you know, like I was saying earlier, you know, having these better discussions so we don't end up in court. You know, otherwise it's just going to be a fight where, oh, we don't like this law, it gets passed, and then we're going to go fight in court. Okay, yeah, it's going to pass, but we'll fight it in court later. You know, why should we even get to that point? And then, you know, just, yeah.
All right, thank you. This is a question from Mrs. Mitrano. How will affordable and reliable broadband expand economic and educational opportunities in Chautauqua County? And if elected, how will you see to it that we have countywide access to broadband internet?
I cannot stress an issue more than broadband deployment for this entire district for economic revitalization. And of course, Chautauqua is a very big part of that. In my experience, and even living out here, I have recognized Chautauqua has been through the economic ringer and no one has come here to help. Well, you cannot restart an economy in the 21st century with advanced manufacturing or anything else, call sites, the hospitality industry. Everything requires the internet. The failure of our congressmen to have brought the internet to this district is the failure to economically revitalize it. It has to be an alignment of federal, state, and local matter. I do believe that Governor Cuomo has not adequately addressed this issue for areas west of the Hudson, and I've looked at it very closely. I come from a policy background concerning the internet. He keeps giving the grants to internet service providers instead of allocating them to the counties so they know the public-private partnerships, for example, that work in the Steuben, Allegheny, Tioga, and Chemung, even Yates County, where I live area.
Thank you. Mr. Kolsty?
Could you repeat the question?
Right, I have to find the question now. Is it better for the Chautauqua County, to have an economy? I'm sorry, hang on one moment. I went on to the next question and I missed it. How will affordable and reliable broadband expand economic and educational opportunities in Chautauqua County? And if elected, how will you see to it that we have countywide access to broadband internet?
Of course, broadband internet is important. It's a utility like electric and water. And, we've seen, through the past, 20, 30 years, how it's revolutionized and changed our society. And even with COVID, it has changed our society. And, the technology is getting better, and the internet has been mostly, unregulated, and it's been able to expand freely. So it's certainly important. And what we need to do is we need to just continue to push for more and more innovation. There's new technologies out there that are, working on getting it into rural areas, that, Google and Tesla and all these companies are. So we need to continue to encourage these companies, to do that. It's very important that we have that, and not stifle any kind of innovation. So we just need to continue to do that, because we have had exponentially increase of technology, more and more.
Thank you very
Can I
much.
have a 30-second?
It's a rebuttal. Right?
Well, it is. I do agree with innovation in business, but it is clear through electricity, it's clear through telephone, and it's clear through the internet. Ultimately, you have to have government come in and help, because the innovation is driven along a market line. And if it is not remunerative for a publicly traded company to be laying down hundreds of thousands of dollars of cable as the backbone, you have to have someone come in and do it, or you're going to strangle an entire area of economic possibilities going forward. So this is why, as we did with electricity, as we did with the telephone, we should do with the internet. And then they can come in and begin to work.
Thank you. Our next question for Mr. Kolsty. Should the Electoral College be reformed or kept as is?
Well, as far as the Electoral College is concerned, and there have been a lot of people have complained. Twice in my lifetime, it's the popular vote didn't go to the ultimate electoral winner. There's also a lot of strategies with that as well. For example, in New York, it's clear that New York is going to go to Joe Biden, but also the vote for president is vital. And, our candidate, Joe Jorgensen, in order for the Libertarian Party to maintain ballot access, in order for the Greens, the other parties, they need a higher threshold that Cuomo is pushing. So, the Electoral College is sort of benefiting us to hopefully do that. But as far as electoral, what I would be in favor of as far as electoral reform is, more proportional, congressional districts, there's been different things about, having a list, and, if 10% of the people vote Libertarian, we should have a Libertarian, member of Congress. If there's 10, and then, 40%, 50% of the other parties, that would give more voices in Congress.
Thank you. Ms. Mitrano.
Yes, I am for the abolition of the Electoral College. The Electoral College was created when our founding fathers had a different concept of democracy than we do today in the 21st century. It was one underwritten with the assumptions that the suffrage only belonged to white people, males, and landed people. The reforms in the 19th century took away the landed. Obviously, 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment touched on race, and we needed the 19th Amendment to finally take away the qualification regarding gender. It is built on a system that does not respect one person, one vote. And that is the kind of democracy we must have in the 21st century. And therefore, it is an anachronistic part of our Constitution that deserves attention for repeal.
Thank you. Our next question. Do you believe there is a legislative means by which diversity in the workplace can be improved? We'll begin with Mrs. Mitrano.
Yes, I believe in transparency, even for private companies, to disclose what positions they have according to a variety of as diversity is defined in this country, and the pay scales and so forth. I think with the transparency, that would really make a big difference, because it gives people individual agency then to make decisions. It also exposes those companies when it comes to shareholder meetings, so that people can speak out on their behalf. And, you know, it'll help you right there as you're sitting there at the coffee station to know that someone's being paid so much more, you're doing the same work. Any of those kinds of scenarios can be corrected with transparency. So that is the kind of legislation that I would recommend the most.
Thank you. Mr. Kolsty, what are your views on that?
Could you repeat the question?
Yes. Now I'm going to make sure I have the question in front of me until we move to the next one. Do you believe there is a legislative means by which diversity in the workplace can be improved?
I mean, it's as far as, you know, if someone's being discriminated against or have, you know, in the workplace, I mean, it should be their right to go to court with that. I don't think the government should be, you know, legislating or telling companies what to do, because that can lead to corruption, because some companies might say, okay, yeah, you know, we need to do this, but, you know, if a politician favors a particular company and they have some certain practices that, you know, are not necessarily ethical or following, you know, promoting diversity, you know, they're going to look the other way. You know, you're going to have the corruption there. So, but people should have, you know, a right to, you know, take legal action if they're, you know, against each other. But the government shouldn't really be stepping in and you know, dictating what companies do.
Thank you very much. This question is specifically for Mr. Kolsty. Your candidacy would seem to benefit the incumbent. What are your thoughts regarding this sentiment?
What do you mean?
I'm reading the question. You can interpret it how you wish. Your candidacy would seem to benefit the incumbent. What are your thoughts regarding this sentiment?
Well, libertarians take votes from both sides, independents. I don't see any benefiting any particular candidate. You know, we've had candidates poll for both the Republican candidate or the Democratic candidate, and you know, it just varies. You know, for example, the presidential candidate has been polling a lot of people from the left and focusing on you know, Black Lives Matter and police brutality and addressing those, whereas, you know, Larry Sharpe in his campaign, he was focused on Second Amendment. I don't see myself as taking it from, you know, more like both or favoring any particular candidate, you know, but it varies on the issues, and it's, you know, it's up to the people to decide, you know, who they want to best. It's, you know, it's three candidates, not one candidate, two candidates, and one benefiting one or the other.
Thank you very much. I hope you were finished. Our next question is, should funding for police organizations be redirected to social programs? We'll begin with Andrew Kolsty.
Could you repeat the question?
Yep. Should funding for police organizations be directed to social programs?
I don't necessarily agree with you know, mingling funds with, you know, diverting funds here or there. I mean, certainly everything needs some kind of funding, but I'll address each separately. As far as police funding is concerned, I know there's been, you know, a lot of talk about defunding the police, which it's really, we need more reform with that, you know, when it comes to criminal justice and those kinds of issues. But you know, as far as social programs too, there's also a lot of problems with those with regard to the welfare trap. So I don't think necessarily diverting funds from here or there is going to fix any of the problems, either criminal justice or social welfare. It's just, it's looking at the underlying problems, which, you know, can get real deep, because those are both two separate issues.
Thank you. Mrs. Mitrano.
No, I absolutely do not believe we should be siphoning funds off from this absolutely necessary function in our society to have law enforcement. But I absolutely also believe that we should be funding the social welfare and programs, the kind of which Andrew was just talking about. I have two stepsons who are law enforcement officers in this district, and they tell me that the lion's share of the calls that they go to concern domestic violence, abuse and neglect, and mental health. sometimes physical health, and sometimes issues related to food and housing insecurity. Those are social issues. We should not be putting our good law enforcement people in these untenuous positions when they're not trained to do a social work. But I do not understand for the life of me why we are pitting the needs that people have in the area of social welfare against our law enforcement. I totally do not understand the construction of these questions. Both need to be supported. I support both, and we need to work together to maintain ordered liberty in this country, period.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next question. Should the United States pass an assault weapons ban again, like we did in the 90s to ban assault rifles? We'll begin with Mr. Kolsty.
I support the Second Amendment. When we talk about, banning this weapon or that weapon or a particular feature of a weapon, it's not getting to the root cause. We could pass a ban. A couple of years it'll be repealed. Then we'll pass some other legislation. It'll be repealed. It'll go back and forth. It's not getting to the root of the problem that I talked about in the beginning. And the root of the problem has a lot to do with where does this violence happen? Where it involves in low-income communities. So we need to address poverty. We need to reduce crime. And that includes the war on drugs. We need to end the war on drugs because that's where a lot of the violence is created. And also, mental health. And it's overall a cultural change. Banning a particular gun is not going to solve the problem. And it's just going to, a common thing that is said is that, criminals won't abide by those laws. We need to get to the root of the problem, not attack it from the surface.
Thank you. Perfect. Right at the stop. Mrs. Mitrano.
Well, I agree with a lot of what Andrew said, but I am going to address his Second Amendment question particularly. No, I don't agree with that approach. The approach I absolutely agree with is the one where we must repeal, Congress must repeal the law passed in 2005, giving gun manufacturers and sellers a get out of civil litigation card free. First, I do not believe any industry should get a get out of civil litigation card. I think that was a misuse of Congress, bought and sold by large lobbying interests. And in this case, it is keeping from the safety issues, from doing what they always do in the United States. We have better cars, safer cars and washing machines, and you name the service or product because of civil litigation. Are there problems sometimes there? Do we maybe need tort reform? Fine, another subject. But the reality is we use civil litigation to get safety in all of our services and products. And to the degree any of these underlying issues about what kind of gun or how it's used or whatever, take it to the courts where a jury of 12 people, peers, are going to make a decision. And don't leave it up to a lobbied, politically corrupt Congress.
Thank you very much. Our next question. As you see it, what are the challenges facing our primary and secondary public schools here in Chautauqua County? And if elected, what measures will you take to improve conditions in our schools? Mrs. Mitrano.
Well, I would say that we have a conundrum in this entire country where your schooling is largely defined by your zip code. So if your zip code in Chautauqua County or any place else in this country means that you're not going to get the adequate funding and attention and direction that is needed, then right from the start of your life, you're going to be behind the proverbial 8 ball. With a child walking into kindergarten, walks in with all of society's problems on his or her back: poverty, food insecurity, housing insecurity, drug addiction, mental health issues, physical health issues, domestic violence, abuse and neglect. We need first to be addressing all of these issues comprehensively. I take it from what Andrew said that we have some common ground on that point. But we also need to understand why we have savage inequalities in our public schools in the United States, including Chautauqua County, to be sure. You're almost up to 90% of free and reduced lunch, which is the index for that poverty. We need to address that.
Thank you. Mr. Kolsty.
Yeah, as far as education is concerned, it's a state and local issue. The federal government should, at the very least of its involvement, should be just as far as networking and in exchanging ideas. That should be the extent of the role of the federal government. It needs to be more in the hands of the state and local governments, because they can innovate. They can come up with different ideas. If there's a system that works in Iowa, maybe Wisconsin wants to adopt it. Maybe there's a program that Florida tries, and then Washington says, hey, we're going to try that, and encourage innovation. And I'm in favor of school choice. If someone doesn't like that school district, all the dollars should follow the students, not the school. If someone wants to change school district, it shouldn't be dictated by where they live. It should follow them. But we need to encourage more innovation of learning techniques. Let teachers teach. No government one size fits all. Common Core. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next question. What ideas do you have for new solutions regarding the issue of left-right division? Kind of broad, isn't it? We'll start with Mrs. Mitrano.
Well, that is a broad point. I do think in any situation where you're feeling yourself divided, the obvious is we have to find the common ground. And let's go to the values that we share. We care about our families, we care about our community, and we care about our country. So in identifying our common values, I think we can begin to identify the ways in which we can address supporting those values instead of fighting them. I'm going to use the rest of my time, however, to critique the Republican incumbent on this point, because his approach has been to have the usual hypocrisy upon which he governs most of the time. And that is to have this sideshow that he calls problem solvers that never solves a single problem, and then really fails to do the hard work of reaching genuinely across the aisle to get something done, like affordable health care or good education or broadband deployment. He has failed to do the real work of bipartisanship or left-right, if that's what the question is about. And instead we get a sideshow.
Thank you. We're going to go to our next question.
Can I answer that one?
I'm sorry. Yes, you may.
Yeah. Yeah. As far as the left-right division, which has been covered earlier in this meeting, it's definitely something we want to address. And I agree with Tracy. We need to find common ground. We need to sit down, like I said, take the most conservative Trump voter and the most socialist Bernie Sanders supporter and see what do they have in common ground. Whether they have 100% in common with, then 90%, and then we start there and work our way forward with that. And we need to stop villainizing each other in that side is completely evil. If you vote for them, it's going to be downfall of our society. We can't do that. I mean, you even see anyone who wants to step out of line, out of party line, happen on both sides. With Justin Amash on the Republican Party, he switched over to the Libertarian Party, and Tulsi Gabbard was annihilated in her party. And both of them were trying to reach across the aisle, trying to challenge the status quo. And instead of them being pushed out, that should be rewarded. We should have more people like them.
Thank you. Next question. Threats to cybersecurity are a risk to our elections, our institutions, and to private citizens. What should our government be doing to recognize and block cyber terrorism? We'll begin with Mr. Kolsty.
Yes, living in the 21st century, as technology is a lot more prominent, cybersecurity is very important. I'm not a fan, as a libertarian, I'm not a fan of government stepping into a lot of things, but one of the very few things is national defense. And, when it comes to the military, we have the largest military, we spend the most amount of money, and we meddle around all over the world. We're the world's policemen. We should be the peace, the promoters of peace. If we did that, we would spend a whole lot more money. We'd bring a lot of the troops home, and the savings, what we would be able to do, not only would we pay off the debt, bring money back to the taxpayers, but, also improve our technology and also provide for veterans. But we spend so much on the military that if we had adopt a policy of non-interventionism and promoting peace, we can focus on what's very important as far as our defense, like cybersecurity. And then, the savings can go to the debt, go to veterans and go to back to the taxpayers.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Mitrano.
Andrew had a lot of good ideas there. I am going to focus on cybersecurity, however, and I will say this, the number one thing that we need to do is to have diplomacy. We have no international rules governing the relationship with cybersecurity. So what people may or may not understand is what is often going on, and certainly what went on in the interference of our elections or the taking of all information. When I used to work at Cornell, all kinds of material was going out, research data, intellectual property, journals from the library, very expensive materials. We need rules of the road. And there will not be a settlement of these issues that are being perpetrated by nation states. It's not just organized crime, and it's not just the proverbial stereotype of, the kid in his bedroom. It is nation states doing this. We need to stop this activity, and the only way you do it is through diplomacy and the establishment of rules. Will it end all conflict in this area? No, but it is the start.
Thank you both very much. Our next question, is it better for Chautauqua County to have an economy focused on the creation of goods or services? We'll begin with Mrs. Mitrano.
Well, why not both? I'm a great advocate of a mixed economy. I think it's dangerous, just like in agriculture or anything else. You don't want to put all of your proverbial eggs in one basket. We should have a mixed economy. But what we need to get even to the place where we're flourishing with both goods and services is to have the foundation, the building blocks. And I'll repeat them again. Healthy people, educated, properly trained people, and I mean from pre-K all the way to professional and graduate education, as well as support up to grade 14 that we need to have even for vocational and certificate programming. Then we can begin to have a diversity of products and services, agriculture, advanced industry, and even helping in areas of cyber defense.
Thank you. Mr. Kolsty.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. Is it better for Chautauqua County to have an economy based on the creation of goods or services?
Well, it depends on the people and the businesses in what they want in there. Whether both are good. It just depends on what the people there and what the businesses moving there want. But in order to have an environment of economic prosperity there, a lot of this is more state issues, with regards to property taxes and regulations and unfunded mandates, and it's a big state issue that Cuomo has hindered a lot of progress. A lot of people have moved out of the state, especially in upstate New York, and a lot of them are the productive people that are moving out of the way, entrepreneurs and everything. They're going to places where there's less taxes. And, again, like I said, this is a state issue, but, we need that economic environment that's friendly and, doesn't, stifle innovation and economic development.
Thank you. Next question. What is your priority, creating incentives for green technology innovation or working to revive the coal industry? We'll begin with Mr. Kolsty.
As far as what was the second part of that question?
Hang on a second here. What is your priority, creating incentives for green technology innovation or working to revive the coal industry?
Well, of course, we need innovation in technology. The solar and wind, aren't the most reliable, and it's going to take decades before it replaces coal. As far as promoting energy, we need whatever is efficient, whatever is going to run the world. We can't just stop because industrialization over the past 150 200 years, even if it's dirty technology, even if it's pollution, it's actually brought the world out of poverty. If we're quick to eliminate sources of of fuel and energy that have alleviated poverty, it's going to be a lot tougher to promote more innovation for green technologies, such as solar. And I say solar because wind has a lot of problems of its own, where it's not as efficient. But we have a long ways to go. But we certainly should have more innovation.
Thank you, Mrs. Mitrano.
Well, I'm a good poker player, so I'll see you and raise you. Obviously, I think we should be moving towards renewable energies, and I support Biden's position on this, which is to say we have to have a plan where we are looking out to the future, and through carrots and sticks, proverbially, with federal legislation, we can begin to move the oil and gas companies in a direction of the renewable energies, and that's the direction we should be going. That implicitly suggests that coal is not going to be the fuel of the future. In addition to that, I want to say our area would be a splendid place to bring this kind of advanced manufacturing in renewable energies, because we have the natural sources here of wind, even of solar, believe it or not, and certainly of water and hydro. So we would be a great place if we can get all the other foundational pieces in place in order to revive our economic engine. We could be a location for exactly this kind of advanced manufacturing and industry and innovation going forward.
Thank you.
Our universities.
Thank you.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, you can rebut it. 30
Yeah.
seconds.
Yeah. I like the idea. Obviously we do need to move toward greener technology, and we should have a plan. We should promote innovation. Some of the things, we shouldn't have tariffs that make the cost of producing solar very high. If they're going to make it in other countries and it's green technology, why are we going to increase, tariffs? But they're not reliable, and we also need to be realistic. I think solar more than wind. In this area, wind is filled with cronyism, and it's a benefit to the companies, the governments, but not the people. It has problems of its own, noise pollution, killing birds, etc. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Has Nafta done more to help or hurt the U.S. economy? Mr. Kolsty. Nafta. Has Nafta done more to help or hurt the U.S. economy?
Well, free trade in general, we need free trade in general because it makes the cost of goods, much lower, no matter where they are. When I am for all free trade, no matter what. I know a lot of people, there's some people that prefer protectionism for protecting American jobs. But when you have, American jobs are also threatened by if their raw materials are outside the country, and you have tariffs on certain products and certain goods. So free trade is necessary. The government shouldn't get involved because a lot of times the government will favor these industries, as opposed to going with the products that people want and people get.
Thank you. Ms. Mitrano.
Both is my answer. I think that it did not help many of our industrial manufacturing industries, and yet I do think that it also helped some of our trade. I am in favor of the revision that we now have with the Canadian and Mexico agreement, but I don't think it is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I think that it just has included some necessary amendments to improve, particularly in the area of auto manufacturers, as well as in the area of agriculture and milk, which is very important, dairy industry in this district. But let me say this argument that has fallen down the partisan chute has failed to recognize the larger issues of the failure of planning in the United States when you have global shifts in an economy. Over the course of our time, we have gone, American history, from agricultural to industrial manufacturing, and we are living through the transition to an information economy. We did not protect our workers, and we should have planned ahead, whether it's education, whether it's pipelining students, whether it's developing advanced manufacturing here in the United States. That's the kind of planning we need going forward.
Thank you. Should there be a citizenship question on the census, Mr. Kolsty?
The census requires a population count, and that's all. Just for redistricting, that's all it should really have. Just whatever's in the Constitution.
Thank you,
That's
Ms.
my answer.
Mitrano. Oh, were you done?
That's, you know, I just said that's my answer. Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Mitrano.
Well, I agree with that. It is used for other purposes. For example, in federal allocations. It's also used, like, for example, in broadband, and in the conundrum of not having broadband and having low census return rates is being repeated here in this district. Absolutely, it should not have a citizenship question because it's not related to what the census is for in the first place, which Andrew stated essentially is for apportionment.
Thank you. How would you address the Me Too movement as a member of Congress, Mrs. Mitrano?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
Yeah, how would you address the Me Too movement as
Me-
a member of Congress? Getting a little tongue-tied at this end.
Yes. Well, you know, we have laws, particularly Title VII. And Title VII now by the Supreme Court has been extended. It's mostly in employment, but it does make harassment, sexual harassment illegal, both as they say, quid pro quo, as well as a hostile workplace environment. You know, it would have been great if Congress could have passed that law instead of having it go to the Supreme Court. And it would be great if we can apply that across the board, not just in the employment for what the Supreme Court did with respect to LGBTQ community. I think we have the laws we need. We have to be sure that we have the appropriate prosecution. And I don't mean over prosecuting. I just mean that victims can be believed and they can have their day in court. But we need a cultural movement. I believe the laws are there. We need a cultural movement, beginning in education, beginning in our homes, and then also carrying through in our workplaces.
Thank you. Mr. Kolsty.
I do agree that we need a cultural movement. But to sum it all up, if there's a victim, there's a crime. And, you know, we need to have a judicial system that is ready to prosecute. Mm-hmm. So it's just quite simply, if there's a victim, there's a crime. And, you know, any corruption that prevents, you know, a victim from getting justice, you know, should be addressed. It's that simple.
Thank you. I have one more question before a closing statement. Should voters in federal elections be required to show ID at the polls? Mr. Kolsty.
I mean,
federal elections.
We show ID for a lot of things. I wouldn't be opposed to it. You know, of course, there's problems with some people who may not have ID. But you know, I've seen issues as a member of a third party where, you know, a lot of it comes in with the mail-in ballots and ballot harvesting. You know, we get a lot of corruption there. You know, especially in, you know, like a small primary for a third party. I wouldn't be opposed to requiring ID for voting.
Mrs. Mitrano.
And neither would I, so long as we did it in a phased-in manner, and we did all of the background work to be sure that people in low-income areas or those that live on the margin of society are given every encouragement and opportunity to get that identification. So I don't mean doing this tomorrow. I mean, if we're going to have a voter identification required at an election site, we have to have a program well in advance that makes sure that we have the identification available to every citizen, every voter in this country.
Well, since you're so quick, I have another question before the final one. What is the best indication of economic health? The stock market, unemployment rate, income? What do you think is the best indication of economic wealth? Mr. Kolsty.
I mean, there are a lot of things. It's overall wealth and prosperity. It's you know, it is, you know, having a low unemployment rate. It's having a low poverty rate. It's having a high literacy rate. You know, it's all those things that shows that. And in fact, over the course of the past 100 years, globally, a lot of that has greatly improved thanks to industrialization, capitalism in the market. And it's a trend that needs to be continued. And often government does get in the way of that. But overall, it's because of our market and because of capitalism, because of all that, we've been able to up that. You know, global poverty rate has diminished, you know, over the course of the years. But you know, there's numerous factors that show that. But yeah, it's yeah, there's a lot to it.
Mrs. Mitrano.
Very quickly again, the question. No, actually, I think I got it. All of the above are indices. I don't think it's healthy for us to say it's this one, that one, or the third. But I'm going to use the question to say one of the things that I think is a most necessary reform in the next Congress. We need a progressive tax, a simple, basic progressive tax. It is part of what made the United States great in the 20th century to the degree that it was, along with its victory in the world wars and a strong labor movement that stabilized economic and social unrest at the turn of the last century. We had a progressive tax. It is how we funded programs. It simply makes sense. People, as they make more money, pay a proportional larger of that income. We also need more tax brackets. It's crazy to end it at $400,000. People are making billions of dollars. We need more brackets. And I want to be clear, I am not talking about great big percentages as we got to in the 60s and caused this reaction with now the trickle down and tax cut acts. Something that is reasonable and appropriate. That's how we're going to clear our debt.
Thank you very much.
Can I respond to that?
Rebut.
Yep.
Rebut. Yeah. 30 seconds.
While I understand that one point I want to make is there's been a lot of talk about taxing the rich, and I do agree that when we had those tax rates years ago back in the 60s and 90%, they weren't paying it. There was all these loopholes. They were more paying 50%, but we need to be careful. We can't tax ourselves out of prosperity. I mean, the rich are going to find loopholes. They're well connected politically. The people raising the taxes are the ones that their campaigns are being funded from.
Thank you very much. We will now allow 1 minute for a concluding statement, and we will begin with Andrew Kolsty.
All right. Yeah. So, basically, we had, we need to end this polarization, this left-right divide. We need to have more, civil discussions. Like I said, bring the most conservative Trump supporter and the most socialist Bernie Sanders supporter and find common ground. The reality is we're not going to fix things overnight. A lot of things, urgently we need to do this. Otherwise, we're going to have collapse. A lot of these things aren't going to happen overnight, unless we magically had trillions and trillions of dollars. The other point is big corporations benefit from influencing laws that ultimately will hurt small businesses. So to say we need to expand government to help the little people. Well, you expand government, it's going to benefit the big corporations, which are going to put the little people out of business. Do we trust the consumers in the market, or do we trust the corrupt billionaires and their political friends? I would trust more the market and the consumers and the people. We're better off in the 21st century than in the past. We need to think differently. Blue and red have had their chance over the past 150 years. It's time to vote gold. It's time to vote libertarian. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Mitrano.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with how much Andrew and I have agreed on a number of matters. And most of the first part of what he just said, I agreed with very much. We have to get over this partisanship. We have to begin to work together. My message to our absent candidate at this forum is bipartisanship begins at home. And when you campaign in the style that you have been doing, I'd love to know what the members of the bipartisan caucus to which you belong think about the kind of advertisements that you have been putting out about a potential member of Congress. But here's where I do disagree a little bit with what Andrew was saying. I believe we can fix the political corruption that we have in Congress. I agree with his assessment of where we are now. When we had a stimulus act giving $500 billion to big banks, big corporations, and special interests, leaving the people who really needed it out, it told you everything that we need to know, that we need change in federal government. But maybe the difference between Andrew and me here is this. I believe we can put people in office who have the better intentions, and we can put the controls in to be sure they maintain their intentions for the public. Thank you.
Thank you very much, candidates, for joining us for this. You're the first for a Zoom debate, and I think you both did very well. Our next segment will begin shortly, and the candidates are in our virtual waiting room. So thank you, Mr. Kolsty and Mrs. Mitrano, for joining us, and we'll start our debate for County District Attorney shortly. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye, Andrew.
Both of you. You there? Yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening. Did you have a mic check? I mean, I want to make sure you're loud enough. Are you?
I should be loud enough. I've been on enough of these meetings where I don't think anybody's
Okay.
got a problem hearing me.
You're good. All right. I have to hear you, but okay. So for this segment, we are welcoming candidates for Chautauqua County District Attorney, Jason Schmidt and Patrick Swanson. After your opening statements, candidates will have the ability to question one another. If a question is addressed to a specific candidate, the other candidate will be welcome to add comments of their own. Candidates will also be able to rebut or challenge each other, limited to 30 seconds. There will be no counter rebuttals. The candidates will not interrupt each other. I have the authority to pause the proceedings to enforce the ground rules and format if necessary. There will be 1 minute for closing statements. Your opening statement should describe your qualifications for office and respond to this question. What is the most important issue facing Chautauqua County District Attorney's Office, and what will you do about it if elected? We'll begin with Mr. Schmidt.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. I'm glad to introduce myself to everybody. Hi. So my name is Jason Schmidt. I'm not a politician. I'm just a guy. I grew up in a bad neighborhood in Queens. My first job out of college was as a caseworker, working the foster care system, inspecting foster homes in Brooklyn, New York. I went to law school because I wanted to make a change in the system and to help children. I graduated from law school, and in 2003, I moved to Chautauqua County because I was looking for a safe area in which to raise my family. I was thinking about this as I was setting up for today, and I remember that the chief of police in Fredonia came to my house and literally said to me, "Welcome to Mayberry." And that one word, Mayberry, meant so much to me because it meant, you know, a safety, a sense of community, the sense that you can leave your doors unlocked and the keys in your car. And that's changed quite a bit in the last 20 years since I've been here. And it's changed in part because times change, you know, we have to be realistic, but there's also a problem in law enforcement. Now, law enforcement consists of two sides, right? The police who make arrests, and then the district attorney's office that prosecutes cases. And the problem that we have here in Chautauqua County over the last 4 years is there's been a breakdown in the prosecution of the police arrests. Now, I'm a former felony prosecutor. I cut my teeth in this district attorney's office. I started as a misdemeanor prosecutor. I worked my way up to a felony prosecutor. When I left the DA's office, I started my own criminal defense practice. I've been working the criminal justice system for the last 15 years, and I know the system. I know it very well. I've built a record of success achieving wins in the courtroom, in here, in Mayville, in Chautauqua County, and I want to bring that record of success to the district attorney's office. I believe very strongly that we have a public safety issue here in Chautauqua County, and that's a trickle-down effect of the lack of convictions in the courtroom, you know, here in Chautauqua County. Thank you.
You both see where the timekeeper is at the bottom of the screen?
Okay.
I don't have that.
Oh,
I do now. I do.
Okay.
I have to swipe over.
so
Okay.
make sure you keep a little bit of an eye on that, because when it says stop, I'm going to interrupt whatever you are saying at the end of your sentence, okay?
Sure.
Mr. Swanson,
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me, Marcia.
you're welcome.
You know, it's interesting doing these debates as you get into this further, and this is the second time around where I faced the same opponent. And, you know, my qualifications for this office, I think, are quite clear. I've been doing it for the last 5 years. I've been a full-time prosecutor for the last 9 years. Prior to that, I was a defense lawyer in Memphis, Tennessee. I too have extensive trial experience. But the reality is I've been doing this job for the last 5 years in this county. I grew up in this county. My family's from this county. I know this county. And those kinds of things are important when it comes to executing the duties and responsibilities of the district attorney. And your question that you have, that you posed to us this evening is what do you consider the most pressing thing facing our office right now? And I'll be quite frank with you. We have a situation where our courts have been closed for the most part of the last 6 to 8 months. They're slowly opening up. Cases have been coming in and my office has been processing them, but they haven't been moving. And at the end of the day, we need to have an office in place as things open back up that knows how to handle those cases, that knows how to handle the system that we have here in Chautauqua County. We've got to have people in that office that understand the new rules and the changes that have come so fast and so furious over the last 5 years. And what we have right now is just that. You can compare our statistics in our office to any county in this state, and what you're going to see is that we're doing as or better than the average of everybody in this state of 62 counties. And we do that with the highest caseload. There's no secret that we have the highest caseload in New York State. We have about 287 cases per prosecutor. And at the end of the day, we've got a staff in place that's capable of handling those things. And that's the pressing issue that we have today, is just being able to move forward.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go to the question and answer period of the debate. You have 1 minute to respond to the question. Both of you may respond to the question and 30 seconds rebuttal and no counter rebuttals. The first question is pretty easy. So what role does the district attorney have in the criminal justice system? And we'll begin with Mr. Schmidt.
I agree. It's actually a very easy question, and you would think it's something that my opponent and I would agree on, but we actually disagree quite a bit on this. Ultimately, what the role of the district attorney is to prosecute the cases that the police bring and to achieve convictions on those arrests for those cases in which there's sufficient evidence to proceed. That's what's not happening here. It's quite simple, really. We have a prosecutor here who looks outside this county, who travels outside the county, who takes pride in his relationship with the New York State District Attorneys Association, but really isn't doing the job that needs to be done here in Chautauqua County, which is simple, very simple. Let's achieve some success here. You know, in 2019, the police made about 1,000 felony arrests, and we only achieved a 17.4% conviction rate, felony conviction rate. I don't know where Mr. Swanson is getting his numbers. I've looked at those numbers. They're not my numbers. They're reported by this New York State. And those numbers, and Chautauqua County is at the very lowest end. It's not above the average. It's at the very lowest end, and it's been trending down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Swanson.
There's a lot to unpack there that's not accurate. Mr. Schmidt's quoting a 17.4. You can go to the Department of Criminal Justice Services. It's there. The state average last year was 18.9. And if you look at the last 4 years in New York State, our felony convictions on felonies is 21% and the state average is 20. We are higher than the state average. We're doing better than everyone else. If you look at the big picture, and I keep hearing him say the same thing. The numbers are right on. You can Google Department of Criminal Justice Services statistics. You will find them. They're there. And, our office right now handles those cases very well. We do a very good job. And the reality is Mr. Schmidt does have a different view of what the DA's office is. I take a lot of pride in being unanimously selected to be on the board of directors for the District Attorneys Association. That's a 115-year-old institution of prosecutors who work together collaboratively, and I'm respected by my peers.
Thank you very much. As district attorney, how would you or do you handle a fatal use of force incident involving the police? Mr. Swanson.
Well, I've done that, Marcia. Unfortunately, we had an officer-involved shooting here in Fredonia just a couple of years ago. And part of my relationship with the District Attorneys Association allows me to speak with other people that have gone through that as well. And utilizing those resources, I spoke with a number of people that had done this. And talking to people who have done those things when you haven't had them happen in your county is important. And I utilized those relationships, and we did a full and fair investigation. We utilized, I don't know how many different police agencies outside of Fredonia to do it. We compiled about a 37-page report with all of our findings. And You know, what we do is we want to look at them objectively and fairly, and that's what we did in that case, and that's what I would do on every case moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt.
Well, I have to first say, because I'll never get this in, that there's no question that Mr. Swanson is getting his numbers from someplace other than what he's referring to, and I'll upload all that information on my website and Facebook page so that everybody has access to it. I don't make up these numbers. In any event, to the question, look, it's real simple. Work with the police, those police agencies that should investigate these crimes, investigate the crimes, understand what's happened here, apply the facts to the law, and just apply an even-handed, application of the law, whether it's a police officer and that person's duties, or whether it's an average citizen. I mean, that's the job of the prosecutor, is to work hand in hand with the police, investigate what happened here. There's an occurrence. You have to apply. You have to first dig into the facts, understand what happened here, and then you have to apply the law. It's not rocket science. It's something that should be done all the time. And it's not something that you need to look outside the county to the District Attorneys Association to do. I don't think that that's something I would take a lot of pride in. I think we need to clean house first here before we worry about traveling outside the county.
Kind of related to that question is, do you support training for police officers that would provide alternatives to the use of force? Conflict resolution, de-escalation training, sensitivity training? If yes, what area do you feel training is most needed or important? Mr. Schmidt.
Well, look, of course, I'm very supportive of training for the police officers. I think that really the area that is most important is just to maintain communications with the community. I mean, that's what the police do. I was talking to Chief Mashlock in Fredonia Police, and what he misses is the community outreach programs that he put together and sponsored. Same thing with Chief Ortolano in the city of Dunkirk. I mean, communicating with the citizens and letting them know that they're there to help them and not to hurt them. That's the most important aspect of the question that you're getting to. And let me say this, that as a district attorney, I would welcome the opportunity to be a conduit for those communications. I think it's very important that citizens understand the police and all of law enforcement, the entire partnership, police and the prosecutors, are there really to protect and to support the citizenry. We're not there to hurt anyone, and I think all good police believe that quite a bit. Thank you.
Mr. Swanson.
Yeah, this is a topic, I guess, of the day. This is being looked at, I think, as a nation. It's being looked at across the state with the reimagining policing here in New York State. And I think there needs to be a look at what can we train into our police departments so that these encounters go better. Now, I will tell you this, it's important that police are able to stay safe, and they are able to utilize force in situations where they need to. And if you're going to reevaluate the utilization of force matrix, then you have to keep that as your number one priority. You have to be able to allow officers to do their job safely and be able to go home to their families at the end of the day. Now, that all being said, there's always room to improve on these things. And, I would say one area would be de-escalation training for police officers. That would be a useful tool for every officer to have more training on, because they find themselves in very difficult situations quite frequently. And if their ability was enhanced through training to de-escalate those situations, it'd be beneficial to everyone.
Thank you very much. Our next question is, what is your interpretation of, quote, defunding the police? Should funding for police organization be directed to social programs? What is your interpretation of defunding the police? We'll begin with Mr. Swanson.
Oh, I can tell you here in Chautauqua County, there isn't any room for that. Defunding the police, I think, is a mantra that's been taken up in other places. I don't think you're going to hear that here. In fact, the police agencies that I work closely with every day in my office could use more funding. And they need more funding for the very training that I was just talking about. We're talking about reimagining policing here in New York State. The linchpin in that equation, however, is funding to train these officers in areas that they might be undertrained in. And there's a lot of those areas that we could improve upon. And it's not going to happen if you start pulling dollars from police budgets that are already strained here in this county. that'd be counterproductive to what really is being imagined on a statewide level. And my hope is that there's a deep look into just exactly what we need to do to get more out of our police departments so that our community has the trust that we've had for so long that's begun to erode. But there's avenues to go down there, and I hope that we can find those, and it doesn't come from defunding the police.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't disagree with anything that Mr. Swanson said. I think that my sense of things from everything that I watch and listen to is that the defunding movement arises from the sense that the police have turned into some type of militaristic force, and that's certainly not the case here in Chautauqua County. I mean, you're dealing with police that are trying to do more and trying to work within the community with with less tax dollars, less allocation of money directed towards the most simple, basic, rudimentary things such as keeping their police cars running, keeping the transmissions fixed, the engines running. I mean, it's as simple as that, keeping equipment modernized. I mean, they really don't get sufficient funding to begin with, and I don't think that there's any realistic assessment that we here in Chautauqua County, when you look at the local police agencies, including the Sheriff's Department, the cities of Dunkirk and the cities of Jamestown, and the few other police agencies such as Fredonia, Westfield, Ellicott, they just don't have enough money to begin with.
Thank you very much. Do you support an option to charge low-level drug possession to a misdemeanor rather than a felony? Why or why not? Mr. Swanson.
I don't know what that really means. Do I support an option? It's our laws right now are based on what the intent is to do with that narcotic or how much they have. And quite frankly, depending on those two things is where that offense is going to fall now. I will tell you this, over the past decade or so, New York State has made a pretty solid push to move towards really working to rehabilitate people struggling with addiction. And there's been a focus in the last 4 years in my office to evaluate these cases to determine, who is this person? Is this person one of our regulars that's dealing drugs on our streets? Or is this person someone who really needs the assistance of a program that can steer them in the right direction and help them get clean? And we're looking at those cases, and we can move those cases from a felony potentially to a misdemeanor and resolve that matter if that person wants to seek help. And we're actively doing that now. But as far as an option to change it, the system is doing that now. The prosecutors across the state are doing that now.
Thank you very much. Mr. Schmidt.
Listen, there's a systemic drug problem. We recognize that. In fact, it's gotten worse during the pandemic. You have to recognize that. There's also a distinction to be made between users and sellers. There's no doubt about it. Unfortunately, sometimes that gets blurred, right? Because the realistic outlook here is that there's a lot of users that are selling to support their habit. There are a lot of users that don't intend to sell, but their conduct falls within the penal law definition of selling. There are options available, such as opioid court, such as drug treatment court, that tries to assist people to take a charge, such as a felony level charge, that can hurt them for the rest of their lives and reduce it down if they can achieve certain, success in rehabilitation. And I think that has to always be on the table, especially during a crisis point that we're at, where we just have such a systemic use of drugs in the community. And a lot of people, we don't want to criminalize users, because ultimately it's just going to create more of a revolving door. But at the same time, you have
Thank you. I know it's hard to watch the timekeeper when you're on a roll, but I apologize for cutting you off, but I don't know if you see it or not. So
no problem. Thank you.
I have to let you know. Is community outreach a vital part of a DA's job? Why or why not? And if yes, what programs would you institute to reach this goal? We'll begin with Mr. Schmidt.
Yeah, I think that, the worst thing for a lot of people is to feel disenfranchised from the system. to feel as if their voices aren't being heard, to feel as if especially the criminal justice system in the cities of Dunkirk and Jamestown are not serving their interests. And so community outreach is something that's very important. Sheriff Quattrone has implemented procedures. Chief Ortolano in the city of Dunkirk. I mentioned earlier that Chief Boschlock in the village of Fredonia. Community outreach is a very important component of what they do, because so much of what the police do is just working with the citizens, and they have to have a good relationship. In fact, it helps in prosecution of cases. And so, yes, as a district attorney, I would absolutely be part of those communications. I think that that's so important to make people understand that we're here to help them. The system is there to bring justice into their lives. Let's not forget that many of these people are victims of crimes themselves, and it's important that they understand that they can turn to the police. And that's number one issue for me.
Thank you. Mr. Swanson.
Yeah, the short answer to that is yes, absolutely. Speaking with the colleagues that I've become friends with over the last 5 years, the offices that have the resources to do it have very robust community programs where prosecutors go into schools, prosecutors meet with seniors, they meet with the firemen's groups, they get out there, but it's not just the DA, it's the office. And that's important that people know who's there prosecuting their cases. And in speaking with them and what I've come to learn is they've all had great success with those. Now, we've been fortunate to be able to do some of that as well. We run a program called the STAR team, where myself and Brent Isaacson, who's now the chief of police at the SUNY College, implemented a protocol that was in place for schools to enlist our services and the services of the county for free to assist them with students that are of concern that pose what would be called a credible threat. And we assist them in ways that, with things that they weren't able to do before. That program was featured in New York State Prosecutors Consortium as one of 5 innovative programs. But it is important to get out into the community and reach these people.
Thank you very much. Our next question, do you feel that plea bargaining is an effective strategy for our court system? Why or why not? Mr. Swanson.
It has to be. You look across the information and the statistics across the state, and you look at the number of courts that the counties have to push their cases through, and the overall. I don't think there's a prosecutor out there that thinks that if you plea bargain cases, you're not handling it right. It's a function of our system. There's a level of fairness that comes with that as well. There are times when you don't, but for the large majority of cases, you're working towards some sort of resolution that you think is just, that you think is fair, and it's because of the number of cases that come through our system. We had 3,500 arrests last year in Chautauqua County. There's no way we get through that unless we work and resolve cases with defense lawyers, and we make sure that we're finding justice as well as standing on cases that we need to stand on. Those things are very important. But plea bargaining is part of the criminal justice system, and it really always will be.
Thank you very much. Mr. Schmidt.
As a matter of judicial economy, I agree. The problem is that when you have again, I'll say it, a 17.4% conviction rate on felonies, that's a very difficult number to overcome. That's sending a different type of message to the community, and that's a message of no accountability. That's a message of a loss of confidence. That's a message of not having justice if somebody harms somebody else. And that's the problem that we have here. It's a result of a plea bargaining policy that we are not even prosecuting the vast majority of our felony cases. In 2019, Mr. Swanson went forward on 23% of the 1,080 felony arrests. The rest of those were either pled out or were dismissed. And that's just unacceptable. It's not acceptable for me and my family. It's certainly not acceptable for the families of Chautauqua County.
Thank
May I
you.
respond to that? Because there are some things in there that are untrue.
Well,
Pardon me, are you
I'm not
rebutting?
sure what.
Yeah, I would like to rebut that, Marcia.
Are you rebutting?
Yes, I would appreciate that. I get
Okay,
30
seconds.
Okay. Mr. Schmidt keeps saying that we don't go forward on cases. That's absolutely false. He just said it himself. Plea bargain amount. He just said that it's a necessity for the system. Plea bargaining a case is moving forward on a case. You're getting a conviction. you're finding some resolution. And this notion that we're not prosecuting our cases is just nonsense. I've heard it a lot. It's not accurate.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our next question. What would your policy be charging children in adult court? When would you use your authority to do so? Mr. Schmidt.
Well, that's, in some respects, that's a legislative issue. Okay, but you have to hold people accountable. If somebody commits a violent crime, you have to hold them accountable. And if they're above the legal age where they need to be treated as an adult as determined by the legislature, then you need to hold them accountable. And I just have to take this opportunity to respond. The numbers are accurate. They're not my numbers. They're the state's numbers. The Division of Criminal Justice Services, the Office of Court Administration, they have these numbers. I'll make sure that they're available to the public so that they can look at them. Thank you.
They're right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
The question was, what would your policy be regarding charging children in adult court? We're done with the last question. Mr. Swanson, do you want to handle that?
Yeah, we have a rubric set out right now that the legislator has made into law that determines when and when you cannot prosecute someone who's less than the age of adult, and you simply apply that. There are a number of factors that you're going to consider when you do that, and quite frankly, most of them are all statutorily defined. And you're going to review those statutes, see if you have a case that fits underneath what the legislature has prescribed as a case that you can move forward on, and you do it that way. The reality is I can't even tell you if we've done that, because if it ends up going to juvenile court, you're very limited what you can say. And what I can say is that my office has reviewed these statutes. We're very familiar with them, but in the event that some critical or serious incident does occur, we're prepared to move forward in the way that we need to.
Thank you. Our next question is, what is your position on bail reform? Do you feel it helps or hinders our justice system? Mr. Swanson.
Do I get more than a minute?
No.
It's impaired what we can do. And I say that because we're releasing people that probably shouldn't be released. And the rigidity of the law, there are times when you may be holding someone who doesn't need to be held. The problem is they took away judicial discretion, and I don't know why. We have elected judges that sit in our town and village courts and our city courts and our county court, and these folks are elected to do that job, exercise discretion. They know their communities, and they've taken that away. And what we've seen this year is a pretty marked increase in shootings, pretty marked increase in homicides. And I think you could directly attribute that to the fact that we're not able to hold drug dealers in custody, because all of the offenses for narcotic sale, unless you're a major trafficker, which is a very difficult threshold to overcome, are being released. And what you're seeing is an increase in shootings for that very reason. It was something the DA's Association warned against when it was going on, and we were right.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Schmidt.
Well, the short answer to that is we don't have to worry about bail reform. If we get convictions in the courtroom and we send people to prison, we hold them accountable if they commit crimes, and that's not what's occurring here. But look, there was a reason why the bail reform laws were put into place. I mean, I used to see it in the courtroom all the time. You had a situation where people literally got lost in the system. They couldn't make bail. Let's say they were arrested in the summer, and I remember in the middle of the winter seeing them being brought into the courtroom for a pre-trial proceeding, and realizing that really they had served so much time already because they simply did not have the economic resources to make bail. They certainly didn't have the economic resources to flee the community. So I think there was a good reason for the bail reform laws. The problem is that the legislature went too far in removing judicial discretion from the equation. There should be a periodic review process. And look, we have good legislators, Andy Goodell, George Borrello, they're working on those issues right now. But for us, the district attorney's office, get the convictions. That'll solve the problem. We're not getting convictions. It's the lack of deterrence that is causing the problems that we're experiencing in the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Do you support diversion and mentor programs for first-time offenders ages 18 to 25? If so, what would you do as district attorney to promote such programs? We'll begin with Mr. Schmidt.
There's a number of different diversion programs that are already in existence. And the answer is sure, of course I do. We should as a society. We don't want to tag people, with criminal dispositions on their record for the rest of their lives. But you got to do it on a discretionary basis, obviously, right? It depends on the crime. It depends on the defendant and whether the defendant has, a criminal history and what's in that criminal history. But sure, there are a lot of mechanisms available in order to take, a case that may start out on a misdemeanor or a felony level and to bring that down. Drug treatment court is one. There's interim probation that's available to people. I mean, there's a number of different mechanisms available. And I think that they can be appropriately applied. What we don't want to do is we certainly don't want to exploit those mechanisms that are available for people that, that are mostly first-time offenders, that are, that were arrested for nonviolent crimes. We don't want to use them as a way of just, dealing away all our cases. And that's a legitimate concern that I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Swanson.
Yeah, we have a diversion program that started up in the city of Dunkirk just within the last year. It's the Opiate Court. We're one of the stakeholders on that. I worked very closely with Judge Ferroletto and the folks at OCA and the judge up in Dunkirk. And we have that in place for people struggling with opiates. And quite frankly, it's a positive move. But the reality is this county needs the resources to employ something similar to what Albany County is doing with DA David Soares. They have a LEADS program, and I've talked with Sheriff Mitrano about this. It's a phenomenal idea, but you've got to have a peer resource network, and you've also got to have the drug treatment facilities to do this. And unfortunately, Chautauqua County is way behind when it comes to having the infrastructure to be able to put these kinds of programs in place. It boils down to dollars and cents, and unfortunately, that's a regular theme here in Chautauqua County. But at the end of the day, those programs are shown to work. And if we had the resources and the ability, I'd be more than happy to try and put that together.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next question is, how would your office deal with the opioid crisis? Mr. Schmidt.
Well, I think we've sort of touched upon it quite a bit. There's a distinction to be made between users that really need rehabilitative methods of that are available to the community, and then there's sellers, which really just sort of exploit the drug treatment, the drug problem. I think that really when you look at the various diversion courts available, such as the opioid court, drug treatment court, interim probation. These are mechanisms that are already in the system that really can help people that want to be helped. And I think, I think that they work. The system does work. The problem is that you have to be careful. You don't want to, have people exploit those mechanisms. And it's important for prosecutors to be able to discern between people that legitimately need that help and those that really are just criminals that are selling.
Thank you. Mr. Swanson.
Yeah, the opiate issue here in Chautauqua County rise and fell very quickly, replaced then by higher quality meth, and now we're seeing it show back up again. And this is a statewide problem. And, we're part of a drug task force that works even with, as far as the Special Narcotics Office in New York City to try and fight trafficking. But if you remember Chief Harry Snellings from Jamestown, he was frequently heard saying, and on the record, we just can't arrest our way out of this. We've got to treat the folks that are struggling with this disease so that we reduce the number of people looking to buy. Because at some point you have just a basic economic model and function, and when people are out there buying, you're going to have sellers. And if you can treat the problem and treat the folks that are struggling with addiction, I think you really are capable of them making inroads with the enforcement side. And we work closely with our drug task forces. We have 2 of them in the county to do that. We have a narcotics prosecutor at this point. We're working hard to do that, but I think, the treatment issue, I think here in Chautauqua County needs to be a little bit more robust.
Thank you. Do you feel there is an implicit bias in our law enforcement in Chautauqua County? If so, how should it be addressed? Mr. Schmidt.
No, I actually do not think there's an implicit bias. What I do think is I think that the police are under the gun here in Chautauqua County. You know, I think they're taking it from all sides. I think, you know, they make arrests and they don't see their arrests being prosecuted. I know this because I speak to the police all the time. You know, I think they're getting it from Albany. I think that the police are made up of good people that aren't in this job to get rich. They're here to help the community. And I think that they're doing all that they can and they're stretched thin. And the best thing that we can do, you know, on the prosecution side is to achieve convictions on their arrests. Otherwise, you know, the entire system has lost confidence. And really, that's where we're at right now. When you have such a low conviction rate, you know, the police, you know, who put their lives on the line every day when they make an arrest, or maybe they miss their kid's soccer game because they have to process the arrest that's being made, or they're spat upon or cursed at. They don't see justice for themselves. The victims of those crimes don't see justice. And there's a trickle-down effect, and it ultimately emboldens the criminal element here in Chautauqua County.
Mr. Swanson.
So your question was about implicit bias?
Yes, implicit bias.
You know, I don't know how you can say no. I just don't. You know, if you pay attention to the world, I don't know how you say that. You're missing what's happening. And by saying that, you know, by no stretch of the imagination are you insinuating that a police officer is out there doing something intentionally. It's implicit. It's something that's ingrained in our system, that a system that was written when there were slaves. I don't know how you can say that our system treats everyone equally, because I just don't think that it does. And addressing that today is of the utmost importance. And I think you can do it in a way that where everybody sees progress. It's why I'm involved with Sheriff Mitrano in his community meetings and trying to put together some rubric to move things forwards. But, you know, by admitting that there's implicit bias, you're not saying that cops are racist, because I know almost all the cops in this county. They're good folks. They want to go to their job and come home. But there's a systematic problem, and it needs to be addressed.
Thank you very much. Another question. Do you believe that we need to return to a model of neighborhood policing? Why or why not? Mr. Swanson.
I think there's always some benefit in people investing in their community. You know, but at the end of the day, I think you need to have the trained professionals of our police department handling the things that need to be handled. But, you know, that doesn't eliminate the possibility to expand and get people involved with making sure their communities are safe, making sure that people in their communities are coordinating with each other. I think in the areas that you've seen some of those programs instituted, and one of them, a pretty involved community policing program is in place in the Bronx, and that's Darcel Clark's the DA there. And it works. I think you get the community involved, you get the community invested in where they live, and those kinds of things make a difference with your crime rate. Again, you got to have people willing to take the lead and run those programs, but the possibilities are there, and I think they're beneficial from what I've seen with these programs that have been employed across the state.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt.
You know, it's interesting. I think about this community, and what I love so much about it is that people genuinely care about their neighbors. You know, when there's a crime committed, people don't hide indoors. They don't bury their head. They will involve themselves. And that's really just the makeup of this community. This isn't a community made up of anonymity. It's a community where people genuinely care. And I think we in many respects already have the best elements that we see in community policing. You know, when Mr. Swanson talks about the Bronx, You know, and you talk about New York City, I mean, you're talking about a community made up of 8 million people. That's just not Chautauqua County. We don't have those problems. The police are here in the community. I think people genuinely care about their neighbors when they see crime, when they see something suspicious. They're very proactive in alerting the police about it. So I would say ultimately that I think that we're well served just by the, you know, by our neighbors as things stand today.
Thank you very much. Our next question, what do you feel is the most effective system of justice to reduce crime and repeat offenders? Mr. Schmidt.
Yes, so, you know, this is why I'm running. This is what it's all about. You know, ultimately, look, the problem is that when people commit crimes and then they get off because there's a dismissal, because it's been pled down from a very serious charge to something that's just so much less serious, from a felony down to a misdemeanor or a non-criminal violation. There's no deterrence in the community. It has a trickle-down effect. There's no sense of justice. It hurts all of us as a community. Ultimately, people think that they can get away with committing crimes here in Chautauqua County, and that's the culture that's been, you know, that's sort of manifested over the last 4 years. And it's a direct result, in my opinion, it's a direct result of the failure to prosecute the felony cases. And I do disagree with Mr. Swanson when he says that he is proceeding forward on the felony prosecutions when he pleads them down to non-felony dispositions. No, there's a revolving door effect. I would urge everyone to just talk to the police about it.
Thank you. Mr. Swanson.
Yeah, you know, what we've been doing here in this county over the last 5 years is taking a look at those cases where we're seeing our repeat offenders. We've been able to reach out to federal partners. A lot of assistance has come by way of U.S. Attorney J.P. Kennedy, who's become a friend, and he's a friend in more than just a personal level. It's because he cares about what's going on down here. He knows that the federal law is far more severe than what New York State affords us on some cases. So we end up utilizing them as much as we can. But those partnerships matter. And what we've done is form partnerships with them, the Attorney General's office and their Violent Crime Task Force. But what we're doing here is we're really taking a hard look at those repeat offenders and holding them accountable. And I think if you look at those statistics on the criminal justice website, you're going to see that what we're doing is good quality work, and we're doing that despite having the highest caseload in this state.
Thank you very much. Our next question. What steps would you take to safely reduce the rate of pretrial incarceration in our county? Mr. Swanson.
Did you say safely reduce the rate?
Safely reduce the rate of pretrial incarceration.
Well, I think what you've seen with the bail statute is that kind of de facto happen. Our pretrial population in the county jail right now is at an all-time low because of the new bail statute. And the concerns I have with this, I think I put on record. I have real concerns with drug dealers being released when their case is pending because of the risk that poses to witnesses and things of that nature. But really, you know, what my ADAs do in my office, and this was before bail was instituted, what we did was we took a very practical approach. If this wasn't an offense where we were going to seek jail time on, then why are we asking to hold them in jail pre-trial? And we did a pretty good job of thinning out the pretrial jail population, and we took a very practical and fair approach to that. Now, moving forward with the new bail statute, it's so limiting with what we can get pretrial bail on. Most cases where we can, we're seeking it because the offense is very serious. Which just increases the risk of flight. So we've been asking for bail in almost all of the cases where we can, because at this point in time, it's a very limited number of cases where we can do that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Schmidt.
I think the import of the question is the emphasis on the word safely. And I agree that the problem that we've encountered is that because of the broad sweep of the bail reform statutes, you know, we've lost judicial discretion. So ultimately, you just have a vast number of defendants and people who are charged with crimes not yet convicted who have been released. back into the community. And sure, there is an opportunity then for more crimes to be committed. It certainly does happen. So really, ultimately it's a legislative issue. It's not a prosecutor's issue so much so as a legislative issue in which we need changes. We need to roll back some of those bail reform laws. And we do have good legislators that are working on that to restore judicial discretion. What I think it's important to have a review process. I think that people languishing in jail during lengthy, protracted pretrial proceedings doesn't help any of us. It's also very expensive for the taxpayers. So I think that if I were to help to mold the laws, I would want to see judges having to review those cases on a periodic basis.
Thank you very much. As DA, what would you do to develop a trusting relationship with the immigrant community in Chautauqua County? Mr. Schmidt.
I grew up in a community that had a very big Hispanic and Black population. I know what it's like, to feel disenfranchised. I've seen it, firsthand, and I think that it boils down to communication. It boils down to community outreach. It boils down to making people recognize that the police and the prosecutors are there to really help people, not to hurt people, but to help people. Let's not forget that a majority of the cases, we've got minority citizens who are the victims of crime. And sometimes those crimes go unreported, and that's because, people frankly are afraid to communicate with the police. In those communities where they don't have a first name relationship with the police, and in those communities where they don't have first name relationships with the prosecutors, I would, again, I would love to be a conduit for those communications. I feel as if, we have a long way to go, but I think the police make a strong effort to achieve just that. And I think that I would welcome the opportunity to be part of that process.
Thank you. Mr. Swanson.
Yeah, this is an interesting question because it's a really it's a substantial issue pretty much nationwide right now. We have circumstances, especially if you have immigrants that aren't here lawfully. They're very, very apprehensive to report crime for fear of deportation and getting taken away from their family. But there's a real issue. The reality when you're the DA is there's two ways to address that. And earlier I spoke of community outreach and the importance of getting out into the community, not just as the DA, but as the assistant DAs as well. But two, showing that community through with what you're doing, that you're going to treat them fairly, you're going to work for them, you're going to treat them no differently than anybody else. I think that's one of the most important things in developing that trust with a community that really has lost a lot of trust in law enforcement over the past 4 years. And I think there's a real concern amongst prosecutors that crimes are being pretty horribly underreported because of that concern of those people with their immigration issues.
Thank you. There was a question for Mr. Swanson that was sent in. How would you respond to concerns from Center for Judicial Accountability that you are, quote, sitting on, unquote, a complaint regarding your salary as well as other elected officials? Yeah,
that's an outfit that has sent those complaints all over the state. I wouldn't call them a legitimate outfit. I forwarded on that message that you would have received. I think I received the same message onto the District Attorneys Association, and it's being sent all over the state. Their complaint is that the legislature and the state on the statewide level had this Judicial Compensation Committee, and the Judicial Compensation Committee over the last 5 years has increased the salary of judges, and during that time, by statute, the district attorney's salaries have increased as well. And the complaint all centers around that being a fraudulent process. There's no validity to it. And there's certainly no crime being committed by Senator Borrello or Goodell or anybody else that's in the Assembly or the Senate. So that's an outfit that doesn't have a lot of legitimacy. But no, there's really no response other than that. That's nonsense.
Thank you. Did you want to comment on that at all, Mr. Schmidt?
The only thing I would just say to kind of to take that question into a more broader context is that we really, over the last 4 years, the district attorney's office budget has increased about 34%. While the productivity rate has gone down, I don't think we'd be arguing about compensation if we really saw results, and results really matter. They matter in life. They matter everywhere else. They certainly matter here.
Do you have any questions for each other? Because I'm done with my questions. So if you want to ask each other a question, you can. Otherwise, we'll continue to a closing statement for 1 minute.
I don't have any questions, Mr. Schmidt.
Do you have a question?
Well, look, I mean, Patrick, you and I have been debating these statistics, and I think each of us are going to put out the documentation so that we can show who's telling the truth and who isn't. But I guess I would ask you, if you believe that your conviction rate is acceptable, I mean, what really is unacceptable? Because when I see a felony conviction rate of 17.4%, and then you argue with me and say it's actually in the low 20s, I mean, to me, that's still unacceptable, even though your numbers are inaccurate. What's unacceptable in your mind?
Just a basic understanding of statistics allows you to reach 21% over the last 4 years very easily. It's some basic math, Jason. And you don't have to stretch to do that. It's a simple formula. It's an average. If you look at what we've done since 2016, our conviction rates and this is the other thing, you're not informing your voters by misleading them.
Sure.
You are talking about felony convictions when there's a felony charge. That is not what a criminal conviction rate is. That is not the same thing. So when you're talking about that, you're misleading the public. And the reality is our felony arrest resulting in felony convictions since 2016 is 21%. And when the state average is 20%, we're doing better than the rest of the state on an average, which is a quality statistic. And the reality is we do that with the highest caseload. These aren't complicated figures. This isn't complicated statistics. These are straightforward numbers. You take them over 4 years and you look at what we've done. And I'm very proud of what my staff has done. For you to insinuate that we're not doing a good job and we're doing better than the state average is misleading at best.
Thank you. I don't think we're going to resolve this during this debate. I think we could go back and forth for the rest of the evening and the numbers would stay the same from each of the camps. So I'm advising the public to check official records wherever they can, websites, and find the correct information. We will now have 1 minute for closing statements, and we will begin with Mr. Schmidt.
Well, look, I started this off by saying I'm not a politician. I'm just a regular guy. I've been working the criminal justice system for the last 15 years. I got into this race not because I want to, better my career. I thought long and hard, and the problem is that we're encountering an unprecedented decrease in felony prosecutions and felony convictions here in Chautauqua County. These aren't made up numbers. I'll post the numbers so that you can see it for yourselves. You know what the headlines read. You know that we have cases being dismissed, indictments being dismissed most recently, mistrials, not guilty verdicts. It's just unacceptable. That's just part of the story. The other part of the story is the lack of prosecutions. That's why I'm running for district attorney. I know what's going on here, and I want to make changes here in this office. And the only way to do that is to go to the mat on some of these cases. That's why I've been endorsed by the City of Dunkirk Police Department. The only candidate here who's been endorsed by local police.
Thank you. Mr. Swanson.
Yeah, I took this position as the acting DA back in 2016. It was a position that I'd watch somebody do. You feel like you're ready to jump into that position, and then you realize that you wear a whole bunch of different hats. But what I did realize very quickly when I started doing it is just the importance of it. How I could give back so much to this community that raised me, and how important that is to me, and the people that I put around me, and the work that we've been doing. I would put up against any county in this state. I would put up against our state averages. We've done excellent work. And this notion that we haven't is an insult to the people that have been doing it. It's an insult to myself. But we work hard every day to make sure that the community stays safe. We're doing a very good job. And at the end of the day, what I do know is that I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to go do my job, and I'm going to do it as hard as I can. And so are the people that work for me. And to have that every day, I think is very fulfilling.
Thank you very much. I want to thank both Mr. Schmidt and Mr. Swanson for joining us in this new venture of a virtual debate. I appreciate your being so brave to join us. I really do. Thank you. And I'm going to make a few closing statements. So good luck in your race, and I'll go forward now.
Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you. You can, yeah, thank you. Educating the public about the issues in the campaign and stimulating public interest and participation in the election is crucial to our mission. Although the dynamic was a bit different without an audience, this format still allows voters to learn the candidates' positions on pressing issues that face New York State and have an informed decision on Election Day. Voting is an essential step in the process of democracy. In exercising our choice for elective office, we affirm our faith in the democratic process. We urge you to take the next step and vote and demonstrate that democracy is alive and well in Chautauqua County and New York State. In New York State, there are 3 ways to vote: absentee mail-in ballots, early voting, and of course, in person on Election Day as well. Early voting will be throughout the county at the Chautauqua Mall, Board of Elections in Mayville, and in the North County at the County Fairgrounds starting on October 24th for 9 days before the election, but not available on Monday, November 2nd. Please check the Chautauqua County Board of Election website for times. Voters can trust the safety and security of the mail-in voting process, regardless of politicized claims to the contrary. Since 2000, there are more than 250 million votes that have been cast via mail-in ballots in all 50 states. Here are reasons you can vote by mail with confidence. Voting by mail isn't new. It's difficult to request a mail-in ballot or cast a vote by mail using someone else's name. These ballots are processed by teams of bipartisan election staff to ensure the integrity of the counting process. And vote by mail programs do not favor one political party over another. Voter impersonation and ballot falsification are exceedingly rare. I want to thank all of our candidates that participated tonight: Tina Rauza, Pat Carell, Lisa Mertz, for putting the whole show together, and our timekeeper, Mary Croxton, who is also president of the League of Women Voters of Chautauqua County. The polls will be open on Election Day, November 3rd, from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. I hope you make the time to vote. Thank you very much, and good night.